I'm alive. I shouldn't be.
He should not be alive. This is unfucking believable.
From the heart of trucker America, my boy Reed Coverdale, host of The Naturalist Capitalist.
This is what government does. It sucks.
If you think you're going to win people over by stating commonplaces, you're just selling the other part.
It is about dictating every transaction that you have for the rest of your life.
Mr. Potato Head.
Coverdale is the guy to be president of the United States.
You intimidated me with your perfect 74 stat.
That was the beginning of my problems.
He died doing what he loved, chasing a minor.
But I'll put a 50 cal attached to my Suburban.
Libertarians need to get out of New York.
The gulag is going to be in your house.
This guy's a fucking murderer. He deserves to be in a
dungeon. Gotta get him out of that truck at night and get him into the White House.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Naturalist Capitalist. 2 live streams in one day today. It's good. We got good stuff to talk about. In case you didn't watch the earlier live stream, I have linked all of my videos over to Rumble from YouTube. So if you look in the description, I have all the links there. You can go follow me on Rumble if you hate YouTube or if you don't like Odyssey or whatever. Anyway, I got a good guest today. He's been on the show a few times. We've had our differences before. We've had our good conversations, bad conversations, all of it. And over the last few months, I've realized that he was right about a few things that I probably wouldn't have given him credit for a few months ago. So I wanted to have him back on. He is, of course, the host of the Pete Quiñones show. Pete Quiñones, how you doing today, man?
Thank you for having me on, Reed. I appreciate it. It's watching your intro. It's so funny. I remember that you got Tom when Tom had his eye thing, and he's wearing the sunglasses. That's so hilarious.
Yeah, he emailed me beforehand. It was like, "Hey, I totally spaced this, but I had LASIK surgery earlier today. Do you still want to do it?" And I was like, I'll be the only guy to ever interview Tom Woods while he's wearing sunglasses, so I can't turn this down and wait for a later date. So we went ahead with it anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Like I said, like we've had our disagreements in the past over things. And I remember we were both at the Ron Paul Institute event in Texas a few months ago, and we were both watching Ryan Dawson's New Mech film that he was screening for the first time. And I remember thinking, like, what the fuck? Like, this guy and I have so much in common. Like, we're both here if we're both in this fucking room together, like any differences we have are mostly, they're minimal. And we've been talking over the last few months since then. And I've realized that you're just, you were right about some things that I didn't give you credit for originally.
I mean, I wasn't right about him 3 years ago. So it's like, why am I going to, I'm just waiting for people to catch up. I think that if people didn't realize some things about 2020, especially, there were a few events that really changed basically politics forever. And it's COVID, the summer of love, the summer of George, the 2020, the 2020 election, and January 6th. And, you can even throw Ukraine, the whole Ukraine thing in there, because that's when MAGA started believing the fake news again. So there's a lot of things out there, and I would hope that people would look at those and reconsider the box that they're living in, because we all live inside of a box. It's just a matter of how small the box is. And, all those things made me realize, especially starting with COVID, just it flipped the table for me, that maybe this box needs to expand a little bit.
Yeah. The biggest thing that kind of hit me over the head with a cinder block over the last couple of weeks was the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire tweeted out an image of Meghan McCain crying over John McCain's casket on August 25th, which, as many know, is the death anniversary of John McCain. And it was met with tons of backlash, and that was expected. The backlash was expected, but so many people who I considered allies or people who stood in staunch opposition to these people and their policies came out moralizing about how awful it was that we would spit on John McCain or his daughter on the 4th anniversary of his passing. And I think they're missing, some of them are just missing the broader context here that Meghan McCain is not like some, waitress or office worker or something that has no dealings with John McCain's, policies, but she's someone who's advocated all his policies throughout her entire TV career. In some ways, she's more responsible for normalizing neoconservatism to mainstream people than John McCain was. Like, John was signing legislation and voting for stuff, but she pushed these ideas on middle-aged housewives and soccer moms and normalized it to basically moderate America. And every August 25th, we're all supposed to come together from the left and the right and, have a somber meeting of the minds and all agree that it's just a horrible thing that this man has passed. And probably every August 25th, libertarians talk about how bad John McCain was, at least some of them, but it never garners attention. This time it was in national news. It was all over the internet, made it into the New York Post, into the what's it called? The union leader on the East Coast. Like, it was all over the place. People were talking about it, and it started a conversation about how horrible these people were. And so many establishment libertarian figures came out of the woodwork to condemn this and defend the McCains and defend the McCain, not just like saying, hey, I think this is tasteless, but saying like, this makes you the same thing as what Meghan McCain and John McCain are, or actually apologizing to Meghan McCain and saying that this is a despicable, disgusting thing we're doing and we should all be ashamed. And it just made me question, like, how serious are you guys about fighting the state? Because that's what you always talk about. You always talk about, like, these are blood-soaked monsters and we have no respect for them. And then, you finally get some national attention mocking one of them and really going after them, and then everybody gets cold feet and takes a few steps back. I remember actually what prompted me to message you is I remember in 2021 when you had your Twitter account still, you made a tweet that said, if the Libertarian Party got designated as a terrorist organization, maybe we would be doing something right, or something along those lines. I don't remember the exact wording, but it seems to me like this is the type of thing, if we're going to be a movement and a party, and I know some of your thoughts have changed around this stuff, but if this is what we're going to be, this seems like the type of stuff we should actually be doing to garner attention and get a discussion going and show that we really actually fucking hate these people. But it didn't seem like that was the case. And I know this is something you've talked about before a lot, that these people, they seek the approval of the regime more than fighting back against it. And I just realized that was a lot more accurate than I had wanted to admit before.
Well, I mean, Lou Rockwell coined the term regime libertarian about these people. Just going back a little bit, I mean, John McCain not only like voted for every war and cheerled every war, he dropped bombs on the Vietnamese.
Mm-hmm.
He killed people with his own hands. So, I mean, he could have not done that. He could have gone AWOL. He could have made sure they dropped in the wrong place. But no, he decided he was going to kill people. Sorry. As far as these libertarians go, is, it's kind of hard to say you want to destroy the state, you want to destroy power, you want to do all of this and everything when you basically want to appear to be legitimate, you want to appear to be respectable. And I mean, really, if you're, I hear terms like revolution. I mean, I'm old enough. I was there in 2007, Ron Paul. We were talking about a revolution, and some ugly language might be used during a revolution, and those are different. Those are different times too. I mean, that's 15 years ago. 15 years ago, it was like gay marriage wasn't even on the table. Now it's like grooming kindergarten children, teaching kindergartners about, gay sex. So, I mean, it's quite a leap in 15 years. I struggle with these people. It's as soon as, I mean, look, I'm jealous of you. I haven't been written up by the SPLC yet. I mean, Jesus. It's like everybody's like, well, you left the Mises Caucus. I'm like, the only thing I regret is because that article, I'm sure I would have been a huge part of that.
Oh yeah.
And it was like Dave and I were talking about that. He was like, you have to feel really bad about that. But why would you? I mean, the SPLC, these people are monsters. The ADL are monsters. The regime are monsters, and all of these organizations are just arms of the regime or apparatchiks of the regime. Why would you apologize to them? You should do, the one that I saw was, okay, so her crying over the coffin. Have you ever seen the one of like the server coming up with John McCain's head?
It's Donald Trump sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, the best one with that, and it's serving like her noodles, is if you would have photoshopped a Viet Cong onto the server's head.
Oh yeah,
that would be perfect. I mean, I would put that out. I would tweet that every day. I mean, if I had an account that still had the kind of reach that that I used to, but it's it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, these are the people who are basically saying half the country are the enemy, and that they're sick. That's the biggest problem, is that Paul Gottfried talks about the therapeutic state, where what they're talking about is they're saying there's something fundamentally wrong with these people, and in their thinking, in their being. What do you do with this? Do you back off? Do you apologize? Do you get scared? I mean, sure, I worry that they're going to come after me for some of the things that I say, but what am I going to? I'm going to stop saying it. Maybe I'll use some words that I'll talk about blueberries or things like that. But why? I don't understand this. I mean, can you imagine in the middle of a war where you're saying sorry to the enemy? No. Or you're just apologizing? Oh, I'm sorry. It's my bad. We're in a war, man. These people want us suppressed. They want us shut up. And in many cases, I'm sure they want us shot up with drugs, to try to figure out what's wrong with us, and try, psychiatric drugs, things like that. I'm sorry, these people, anybody flying the libertarian flag who is apologizing to Meghan McCain, apologizing to the ADL, apologizing to any of these companies, SPLC, you're siding with the enemy. The friend enemy distinction is becoming pretty clear with these people. And then you start to realize, you don't have as many people on your side as you think, and you're probably going to have to make do with less people, and that's going to take a lot of strategy too. So yeah, I just don't get it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't get it either. And the thing is, seeing the responses to that, it made me realize that the incentive structure for like the new Libertarian Party under the Mises Caucus isn't a ton different than it was before. Like, and that's a problem. I mean, the Mises Caucus, the whole reason I got on board with the Mises Caucus was because I became convinced of the strategy that if we go against the grain and don't try to earn approval, that's going to be more effective than trying to earn approval like Justin Amash is going to do or whatever. Like, that was the whole point behind it. But now we're at the point where we're trying to do that again. Like, some of the friction over this tweet was that people who might platform some of our people might get upset about it. I'm like, okay, but if you're going to be the Mises Caucus and we're running not as populist, but like unabashed, like straight down the line, libertarian principled people or whatever, if that's really what we're going to do, we're going to piss a lot of people off who might otherwise platform us. So if the incentive structure with this new, like, edgier Libertarian Party is basically the same, just toned down a little bit, I don't really get what the value is there.
Well, one of the reasons that I started reading like James Burnham, The Managerial Revolution, and I really started looking into bureaucracy. And one of the reasons I started speaking out against, most people don't realize I've never spoken out against the Mises Caucus, their existence, what they do. I spoke out against the LP takeover. And here's why, is because as soon as you take over a political party, which is basically a corporation, which is a bureaucracy. Bureaucrats are in charge now, and bureaucrats, ideologues, you can't. Try to go find an organization that's run by ideologues that still has a very strong ideological message. Chronicles Magazine, Modern Age, they're all on the right. Even something like the SPLC, they don't have a very coherent message because they're leftist. They're all over the place. My problem was I knew that as soon as you take over a bureaucracy, the people in charge, like they put somebody when I heard, oh, this person's going to be treasurer, I'm like, he's a bureaucrat. He's a bureaucrat. He's going to be dictating the party message within 3 or 4 years because the bureaucrats always take over and push out the ideologues. That's the problem. That's the problem I had with it. And when you have a bureaucracy, when you have a political party, I'm sorry, it's part of the state. It's part of the state apparatus. And you are, imagine if and we've said this, I think my friend Aaron was the first one who said this, he said, imagine if the Libertarian Party got declared a terrorist organization. And I started using that. I always gave him credit. But I mean, how could that happen? It's a bureaucracy. I mean, you may have some great tweets coming out every once in a while, but look what happened when you put those tweets out there. The minimum wage tweet was beautiful. I mean, that's one of those ones that, it's like, I'm like, oh, it makes my heart warm, it's like, it makes my day, it makes my week in many cases. But you're a bureaucracy now, and you're part of, you're expected to be respectable. That was my problem I saw it about midway through last year. I was like, I don't know, and I tried to be like, hey, turn it into a lobby group, just like NAGR or something like that. And no one it was like, well, no, we need, okay. Well, I mean, and granted, what they've been in charge of it for a couple months. Still a wait and see process. Let's see what happens. But what we've seen a lot of as far as messaging goes is, the official Twitter account has had some good ones, and that caused mostly other, like the left libertarians and the socialist libertarians, whatever that's supposed to be, to go But the LPNH, that's the one that when you get the attention of, like, what was it? Was it the Times of Israel?
Yeah, Jerusalem Times.
Yeah, the Jerusalem Times. Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. You want to talk about pissing off the enemy. You went right. I mean, you shot a dagger right into the heart of it. That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. No, I mean, and to be clear, I'm also not giving up on it yet, but it's just that this is, I feel like we should be paying attention to how we react to this. Like, this is an interesting moment, and seeing how everyone's lost their minds over it is very telling. If there is any hope for it, like, I think we all need to pay attention. So what if you had to describe, like, what has been your evolution over the last several months since you left? What have you been pursuing more now that you think this strategy is going to be a failure?
Well, I mean, I still think that talking about local politics is definitely the way to go. And from what I understand, that is what the Mises Caucus is about. Cool. But also I remember them saying that, national messaging would be nice, would attract attention. Well, some negative attention is good too. Come on. I know this. I know I have people that hate listening to my show. That makes me laugh. Just focusing on local politics at this point in the places where you can win, taking over city councils, especially school boards. You got to take over school boards. Hoppe talked about in What Must Be Done that was like the first thing once you got your pieces in place was to seek to privatize the schools, to defund the schools of state money and to privatize the schools. I think that's the most important. I think that's where a lot of libertarians fail is, sure, the homeschooling your kids is the most important thing. You don't want your kids anywhere near those schools, but your neighbors' kids are going to those schools, and in 20 years, they're going to be, 15 years, 10 years, they're going to be soldiers for progressivism. And they could be trans soldiers for progressivism at that point, and they're going to want blood. And if you don't take over that local school, if you don't fortify your local area from this insane leftism, and the regime, it's part of the regime now. You see, you have there's an admiral with, calls herself a woman and has a penis. And there's a guy who's in charge of nuclear waste disposal who just like wears red high heels and is like a BDSM guy. And it's just like, okay, well, I mean, looks like the regime has bought into this too. So I think localism is definitely where they should be concentrating all of, I would say 95% of their effort. And I've been told that is the plan. Like I said, it's only been a couple months, they can't get all this off the ground. And I mean, I've been talking about our PAC for a year, and we've finally gotten enough money to run Buck Johnson and, in Lockhart. So it's not overnight. I know it's not overnight. So, yeah.
Yeah, same. And I just think it's important to talk about when you have something like this happen, to be like, whoa, hey, what's going on here? Because to your point about localism, the pushback that we gave at LPNH was, look, we don't expect all of you guys at National or all of you libertarians to back us up on this, on every tweet we make. Like, if it's too far for you, fine. Like, don't say anything about it, or say that you think it's too far, whatever. We're not going to care, because this is New Hampshire. This is the New Hampshire Libertarian Party. And yes, we're affiliated with you guys, but our specific goals in New Hampshire are different than they are in Minnesota right now. Right. Like, New Hampshire, we've nullified all gun laws already. They've removed that. Remember that child labor tweet that went out last year that caused a few months ago, they passed legislation that basically removed all child labor laws in New Hampshire. Not all of them, but a lot of them. So that was a 10 on the Richter scale when it was put out last year. And now it's policy. And so now, like a year from now, imagine what LPNH is going to be able to say or push for messaging versus what is reality or what's inside the window of allowable opinion. And that is localism. Like, okay, the National Libertarian Party can't say something like that. All right, cool. New Hampshire can, and we get away with it. It didn't piss off any donors in New Hampshire. So if the incentive structure is like, look, we all need to have the same exact message, and we all need to rein this in and figure out like what's going to build the organization as a whole, instead of like, all right, look, we'll support the Free State Project for you guys in New Hampshire, as long as you in New Hampshire like try to, give us back some for LP National too. And instead of being like this decentralized movement, it seems like from the reactions over the last couple of weeks that the general desire is for it to become more centralized and less specific to location, which I see as a problem.
That's what power does. Once again, once I started reading outside of libertarian, I would say for a solid 13 years, all I did was read libertarian literature, except for fiction here and there. But, I didn't, once I started reading political theory outside, you realize that power tends to, even a little bit of power, but bureaucracy too tends to centralize. I would think that the Libertarian Party would want to run sort of like how the country ran under the Articles of Confederation, where you have 50 separate parties that basically make their own decisions. And then you just come together every once in a while for the sake of, national messaging or something like that. And basically let there have been a lot worse. There's been a lot worse libertarian messaging. I remember a vice chair being summarily, I think, dismissed over age of consent articles. Writing articles about age of consent. So when you're going after the regime or going after that country over there that controls the regime, basically, to me, that's what you have to do. I mean, it's what the messaging has to be. It's the only thing that's going to wake people up to the problem. And if you have to be a little bit provocative, be a little bit provocative, and I mean, don't do anything. Personally, what I would say is don't do anything that's going to completely, the subjects that are off limits. We've talked about that. You don't touch those. Well, unless you're doing a minimum wage tweet, then have some fun with it. But yeah, you have. I don't see any other way but to throw bombs. I mean, I was saying that back in the beginning of last year when I was still all into the takeover and everything, is throw bombs. I mean, just chuck, Molotov cocktails everywhere and see what happens. And I mean, if you're getting articles written about you overseas, especially in that place, I think you're doing the right thing. I mean, like I said, I'm LP. I hope they can do localism and do it really well. But yeah, man, if you're doing that, I mean, I was retweeting those tweets, so yeah, I've been retweeting a bunch of the LP national tweets, that especially the ones that get under people's skin, because it's the way you get attention. It's also the way you wake people up.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the the idea of pacifying the regime in order to get their attention hasn't worked, so we obviously have to try something else. So I know some discussions we've had in the past, they've been over like whether the right is more ready for this localism message than they have been in the past, and you've thought that they are more than I have. The biggest thing that worries me, and I don't care who the next president is, if it's DeSantis, Trump, Biden, whatever, but it seems like that's where their focus still is. And you mentioned the war in Ukraine became a moment where they started believing fake news again. Has your perception changed at all, or what have you realized over the last few months? Is it mostly the same, or what do you think?
Well, I mean, to me, I think the right is definitely more. I mean, the right's more in line with my values. I mean, the left is just absolutely insane. They're off the reservation. I mean, they're anti-nature. Half the stuff they talk about is just like, if you looked at it, if you tried, like, held it up to nature, it doesn't even exist. It's just, and then they try to make, there were Indian tribes that had trans. Oh, shut up. I don't want to hear that. You can't even who cares? Even if it's true, who cares? I think the right is programmed like everyone else. They've been programmed by the state, by state education, by indoctrination, by their own prejudices. And I still think that even after 2020, there are a lot of them who question policing now after 2020. They saw them enforcing lockdowns. They also hopefully they saw a police officer shoot an unarmed woman on January 6th. But a lot of them still look at policing as police as heroes, and they don't know what they do. So I'm still trying to teach people about that. Military too. I mean, the military at this point it's a joke. I mean, some of the stories that I'm hearing out of the military is just like, I talked to Scott Ritter, and I said, could, if the United States military went and fought a ground war in Ukraine against Russia, would they win? And he's like, they would get slaughtered. It's like, they're just not ready. So maybe the Marines, but I mean, it seems like, from what I understand, the other one, or like, there's a lot of push for transgender people to join the military. And there's just it's basically been, now at this point, when you have an economy that's crashing, it's always been a jobs program for a lot of people, but it's even more so now, where you just have people. I mean, my cousin joined 13, 14, 15 years ago. And it was a jobs program to him. He had 3 master's degrees and he couldn't make a living. And he's just like, oh, I'll stay in here 20 years. I'll get my 20-year pension and I'll be out. I mean, he was a complete Obama supporter. And he's joining the military. So, I mean, that doesn't even make any sense. But the right, I think locally, because especially if you can Concentrate on local politics. One of the big problems with politics these days is politics is completely national. So you'll hear stories about people running for sheriff in their local town of 2000, and somebody will ask them what's their stance on abortion. Why are you asking a local sheriff what his stance on abortion is? That has no bearing on anything locally.
Right.
So I think that you can guide. I think it would be easier to guide a predominantly red area back towards local politics, and get them worried about their own hometown, especially if you can convince them that local politics at this point in time is probably the best bulwark against the regime, the national regime, the crazy leftism, these insane looking people that are going to be coming after your children. Where the left is where not everyone on the left, but the left is more organized. The left is they're less apt to speak out against their own people. They understand that what they crave more than anything is power over ideology, because ideology doesn't exist in the real world. Ideology is, has conservatism ever been practiced politically? Has liberalism ever been practiced politically? It doesn't. If a libertarian got elected president, it would not be practiced. So you're basically dealing with you're dealing with a machine that just goes forward as it always is. But I think the right areas is just the place to concentrate on. I mean, could you imagine trying to do like local politics, libertarian politics in the Bronx, in New York?
No.
I mean, come on, it's just not going to work. So you have to pick your battles too. And I also realize I've been telling people for a couple of years to get out of cities. But some people be like, well, you also talk about tradition and my family's here and everything. Well, I mean, you have to make a decision, man, because anyone who's paying attention notices that the shelves can be a little bare when you go to the supermarket, and the worst place it's going to be if you do run into shortages is in the cities, because truckers and they're just not going to come in there because crime's going to increase. And would you go into the middle of Atlanta in a food shortage? Would you deliver into the middle of be like, screw this, I ain't going in there. I'll quit first, So I still think the right is the right can be guided. I don't know that you can change their mind, but I think that they'd be way more open to a message that contains libertarian ideals in it, not an overarching ideology, but some libertarian ideals of private property, things like that, self-defense, pro-gun. The left is just not going to be there for it.
Yeah, no, I've come to agree with that. And it's mostly, like you said, the rural right, the urban areas which are mostly left anyway. They're kind of a lost cause. And I've found it very effective to almost shame the right into being more right wing. It's almost what, Scott Horton says, like, attack the right from the right and the left from the left. It's kind of hard to attack the left from the left nowadays, but
they don't care.
They don't care. Yeah. I mean, you just point out they're wrong and they don't care. Where the right, you can really shame them for supporting some institution that is, brainwashing their children or something. You could be like, yo, you are not supposed to support this. This is why the enemy wins, because you are too stupid to figure it out. And if you kind of have that aggressive messaging with them, that sometimes the scales fall from their eyes and they're like, okay, yeah, you have a point. And I gave up I'm trying to remember what month it really was, where I started realizing that the country was not going to have any sort of massive awakening. It was sometime last year. I think it was after the summer of 2021 kind of ended and we were headed into the fall. And then they started doing some of the COVID stuff again when we thought it was like, okay, that might be done now. And then they started doing it again. I was like, I don't know if we're ever going to get out of this. And then in the beginning of this year, I finally decided, you know what? If I care enough about this stuff, I need to just move somewhere where people tend to agree with me, which, I'm from New Hampshire originally. My family lives here, got friends here, can get work here, know the state very well. And it all just made a ton of sense. Um, and I don't know. I think that's where the battle is now because, there changes are going to be made. We're going to start becoming more drastically uh, separated by right and left wing or whatever, and so we can decide whether we want to remain irrelevant and just yell into the wind about how much both sides suck or whatever, or you can find a place where people agree with you a little bit more and try to push them in the right direction. I know I'm just telling you what you told me a year ago, but it is true.
Well, yeah, I'm in Auburn now, and it's contrary to popular belief, I didn't move here for the Mises Institute. I moved here because it's a really nice town, and the cost of living is, if I drive an hour and a half up 85 to Atlanta, the cost of living increases by almost 50%. So, coming down here was it's quiet. I do have some friends here, some really good friends here, and I feel like I don't feel that Atlanta vibe that I was getting. I remember 2020, and we had riots, and we had people. There were murders in Atlanta that really didn't make the news, because how many of those murders did make the news? But yeah, so I really think that getting around people that you share values with and you share ideals with is really important, especially if you put together a plan. If you have some kind of support network, some people would call it a mutual aid kind of society. My friend John Bush calls them freedom cells, and you just make sure that you're, and if you want to do stuff politics wise, then the more local, the better. And I think that I would like to hear a lot of people with libertarian sympathies talking more about really gaining power, like, and basically just like moving people out. I mean, we would know for a fact that there are some dangerous politicians nationally. I mean, these people are dangerous. They are like a threat to our existence. And that happens locally as well. There are people who've been elected 25 times unopposed locally, and they're just running the city into the ground. I mean, those people just got to go by hook or by crook. I mean, when you look at how so many politicians, like I remember they said that the way Barack Obama got elected in Chicago locally for the first time was he basically got all of the people that were running against him disqualified. I'm like, sounds good to me. Especially if you have good intentions. Intentions to me are all that matters. I mean, I've gotten to the point where, as far as national politics goes, and I mean, this goes for local politics too. I mean, I really think the only way that you have real true liberty is that you get your friends elected. I mean, I wouldn't worry about Washington. I wouldn't worry about Washington D.C. if it was populated with people who thought like I did. As a matter of fact, I'd probably wouldn't feel so bad about paying taxes or anything like that. Maybe probably still would, but you can do that. You can do that locally. It's much easier to do it locally. Get your friends elected locally. And just, basically then you can whisper in their ear. They may not be the most, and they may not be up on a lot of libertarian points like privatizing this, getting rid of the property tax, doing whatever needs to be done in order to do that, in order to make your local area more free. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where people have asked me, I'm like, we just got to get our friends elected to office. And I think that that's the way we do it. I mean, isn't that what the Free State Project is all about?
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, that's why I moved back. I mean, I've got a lot of disagreements with Andrew from Popular Liberty, but he did make some good points about incentives and the idea that everything is economics. And if people want a government or want a strong centralized state, they're just going to make it happen. You can't like wish it away from them. They'll always get what they want. So you just have to go with people who don't want that or people who want the same things as you if there's going to be a state. And, you know, New Hampshire leans more toward just deregulation and getting rid of stuff. And that's the way I lean. So I just moved here. But, yeah, I don't know. I think, you know, I've never had high hopes that, or I shouldn't say never. I'd say years ago, like 4 years ago, or not 4 years ago, probably 2 or 3 years ago now. Like I still had the idea of like electing someone to president who would be able to start tearing this apart from the top down and turn the country around. I don't have any, I don't have any misgivings that that's a possibility anymore. And I realized that that's almost like a neoconservative approach to changing the country, you know, trying to gain the throne and then undo it from the top down. The most effective way to do it is obviously to take over your local government and then your state government, and then eventually try to be a beacon of, you know, freedom or be an example to the other states. And if you're really doing things well, maybe they'll want to follow suit. But this idea of like trying to turn California around now after how insane they've gone over the last couple of years, or turn, you know, New York around, like it's just not going to happen. Just let them self-destruct and move somewhere where they're going to, you know, respect your way of life. It seems obvious, but I don't know.
Yeah, I have no problem leaving California. I think people should, you know, all the good people should get out of California, and all the good people should get out of New York, and let them just, I mean, I've always joked half jokingly, you know, just build a wall around it and let them eat each other. You know? But yeah, I think that local can be done, and I think you can get to state. You can get up to state, but national would take coordination at state levels first. You'd have to be for years. You'd have to be putting things in place. It's at the state level, or if you just had a Caesar who went in there and just started. I mean, just was like, okay, kill me if you don't like this, but boom, I just dismantled the State Department. It doesn't exist anymore. The State Department is me on Zoom right now. That's it's gonna me. I talked to the president of Belgium or the prime minister. I don't know what they have in Belgium. Never been there. The beer's okay. Then you do stuff like that. It's like, okay, the Pentagon, it's a museum now. I mean, if you had someone, but that would take, you know, Trump talked about that, draining the swamp, and he went, you know, he was like, oh, I'm going to go. Then he just started hiring the swamp. I mean, I could see getting somebody that ideological in, and we've seen it in history. I mean, especially when degeneracy starts popping up all over the place, you have guys very well dressed who, you know, take over, and or like, and people, if enough people are upset at the degeneracy and the corruption that's happening, they will back this person. And you know, and people always ask, you know, people always want to talk about what happened. They don't want to ask why it happened. You know?
Yeah, well, let's get explicit on some of that, because I think you and I have talked about it. It's important to realize why Germany went the way it did in the 30s. It's not like everyone just started hating Jews and wanted to take over the world suddenly. That's a childish way to look at it. Yeah. And you've been doing lots of episodes with Thomas 777. I haven't watched all of them. I've watched bits and pieces of them.
Well, there's 19. I don't expect most people to have watched all of them.
But it's an incredible, it's an incredibly, you know, relevant topic, because the United States is in a very similar situation. Like, people will choose that over our current trajectory. They'll choose authoritarianism and fascism and all that over uncertainty. The uncertainty is what scares them, and then also the complete lack of regard for any sort of cultural norms or whatever. It's going to shock people into choosing something that's really ugly. But what are those series you've been doing about, and what are you trying to get people to realize about the current times?
Well, I mean, everything, the rise of the National Socialists was basically over World War One and the Treaty of Versailles, and then basically the um, just the raping of the country. I'm reading a book right now called Blockade, and it's a diary of a woman who was living in Austria in 1918 and having to ration food because the American British blockade has basically cut them off. And a lot of this happened, and they didn't forget about it. I mean, they weren't going to forget about it overnight. So, 1920 comes along, and basically, like the Soviets, who have just they're 3 years into their reign in in Russia, this communists start pouring into Germany, and they start fighting in the streets. And you have the KDP, which is Communist Party of Germany, and then all of a sudden, Weimar, which is the Weimar Republic at the time, you have all these people who can't feed themselves, all these people who, so you have on the streets, you have child, male and female prostitution. Not only that, you have the inflation of the currency. Not only that, you have Magnus Magnus Hirschfeld opens up a clinic there where he starts doing transgender surgeries, and the clinic doubles as a gay brothel. And this country that comes out of the Prussian Empire, and a great book on that is Iron Kingdom, which goes back to the 1600s and goes all the way forward to 1945. This great kingdom, this proud kingdom, these proud people are completely destroyed. I mean, they're just they look around and they don't even recognize what their country is. And someone pops up and says, "Hey, we are a great German people. This is our history, and we can't allow this to be done." And you see, as early as 1920, 1921, people who will become the National Socialists are fighting in the streets with communists and killing people. Ernst Röhm is out there, going head to head with commies in the street and just murdering them, because I mean that's what it had become, a war zone. And someone comes along and says, "Hey," remember America? Remember what America used to be? Remember how prosperous we used to be? Remember how peaceful it used to be? Remember how much a house used to cost? Remember when property taxes were nothing? Maybe we should go back to that. Remember when no one was pressuring your tomboy teenage daughter to transition and chop her breasts off? Remember that? Why don't we go back to that? And things happen.
Yeah.
People start getting upset. I'm upset. I mean, I really want to see these people suffer. These people are monsters. They are, everything they stand for goes against nature. And what where they're taking us to, if they're not stopped. I mean, think about where we are right now. Think about where we were in 2020. Think about where we are now. 2 years down the line, if people don't start speaking out against us, 10 years down the line, where the hell are we? And then I will bring it to this. What answer do libertarians have for this? This is over 100 years of social engineering. Social engineering, social engineers in psychiatric hospitals, in colleges, who have brought this, who created this and brought this into and made it a part of the zeitgeist, made it a part of who we are. What answer does libertarianism, the libertarianism in a box, no aggression, no power is immoral, what answer do you have for this? Because it's just going to get worse unless you give up on that bullshit. It's a fucking fantasy. I used to talk about it. I friggin' have a documentary about where we talk about the non-aggression principle, where we talk about anarcho-capitalism. Does anybody in their right mind who's not a retard think that we can have anarcho-capitalism in this country after the last 2 years? this is why this is why people hate me, because it's like, I'm sorry, what was that, what's the meme? What? I'm telling the truth, It's like
Yeah.
this is what's
They hate you because
happening.
you tell the truth.
Yeah, I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
what the? I'm telling you the truth. How are libertarians going to fight back against the transgender agenda? What, by ending the state? Okay, how do you do that? By ending public schooling? Oh, how do you do that? Come on, people. I'm guilty of this. I'm guilty of this. I, I'm embarrassed by who I was in 2017, 18, and 19, and into 2020 by some of the stuff I was talking about, because none of that can stop what's coming. And I actually think that maybe not in my lifetime, but in your lifetime, that you could have a city that was mostly private, where almost everything's been privatized. You still have a government because people want the government. And market forces are very powerful things. But that's not going to happen unless there's you're doing you are working really hard, because when you go to do that, even at the local level, you're going to have people coming in from outside who are going to see what you're doing, and they're going to want to fight against it. I mean, I agree. We could have anarcho-capitalism, but not in our lifetime. And when I quote Walter Block, who said we're going to need a shift in evolution in order to have anarcho-capitalism exist in this world, people get upset at me and then start talking about, well, does this person agree with you on that? If this person doesn't agree with you on that, and they're still talking about it, then they're immoral. And people can talk about what they're. People can talk. People can talk. If you want to say, I would love to have anarcho-capitalism, but it ain't going to happen. So this is what we have to do. Good. I'm down with that. I mean, I would love to have. Yeah, I would love to have a private law society, but we have some other stuff we have to work on first. It's I always talk about the underpants gnomes from South Park. Collect underpants, profit. Well, what's number two? I mean, obviously in that it's distribution, but what's number two? What is openly advocating for pedophilia and transgenderism to private law society? What's that middle thing? How do you get there? That's the only question libertarians should be asking. That's the problem they should be trying to figure out. And I don't see anybody talking about that. I mean, sure, you talk about localism. That's only, to me, that's a stopgap, but it can also build. You can also build that to something else. But a lot of these people aren't even talking about that. They're not even talking about localism. They just think all of a sudden the state's going to fall and then everyone's going to choose anarcho-capitalism. Well, yeah. In 2020, there was a virus that was talked about, and nobody came to the libertarians for answers. As a matter of fact, they made tweets making fun of libertarians saying, "Oh, libertarian in a pandemic." It's like, a pandemic destroys libertarianism, and it kind of does. It kind of did. You know why? Because what was the answer? What would have been the libertarian answer to that pandemic? Nothing, because they didn't have power.
All right.
Until they get power, libertarianism is just a theory. It's just a theory. And get power, people. Stop being so allergic to it. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. I like bumper stickers too. But come on, look at the world we're living in. If you don't do something now, look at the progression we've had. How much worse does this get?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, I agree with you. And, New Hampshire is one of the only places libertarians have any power. And it's the only place that they're constantly protested against and constantly vilified in the media. New Hampshire newspapers are calling us vermin that need to be exterminated. If anyone's upset about
something, right?
Exactly. That's the greatest thing they can be saying. I'm so glad that they're saying that about us.
And the first libertarians that we talked about, remember, they would see that headline and that headline would bother them.
Oh yeah, of course. Like to
Yeah.
me, that's the biggest endorsement we could ever
Oh
get.
yeah. Oh yeah.
Um,
You're doing something right.
yeah, exactly. Something else you've said in the past that you're 100% right about is, libertarians need to be impressive, or at least, capable of being a normal person or holding a steady job or something. And so many of them aren't. It's ridiculous. Like, um, all the interesting libertarians of the past have had some sort of accomplishment. They've been very well read, very smart, wealthy, whatever it is. And a lot of, I mean, you look at the average libertarian nowadays, those are not the adjectives that come to mind. And the message of like taking care of yourself so that you can take care of people around you is so imperative, and people don't listen to that at all. But I was wondering if you wanted to expand on that a little bit.
Sure. A friend of mine walked up to me at Tom Woods 2000, and young man, I'm not going to mention his name. He said, I was sitting there at a table with some people. This was a couple days after I stayed, a few days after, and we were talking, and he's like, I want to run for a local office. I'm like, do you work a job? Are you working at a job? Do you have to? I'm not saying that you have to be independently wealthy to run for office. I'm saying it helps. I'm saying not having to, that's why I say that what Hoppe calls natural elites, those are the people that should be, if not running for office, it should definitely be the people guiding the people who are running for office. I mean, what's a bigger meme than watching the pictures coming back from like a libertarian event where there's like it's not like Libertarian National Convention. Was it this year? Yeah, this year. I mean, there were that thing wearing butterfly wings, the people who, who's going to follow these people? Mm-hmm. Who's going to follow these people? I'm not saying that you have to be Brooks Brothers, but come on, you have to be respectable. I mean, if you're not somebody wants to follow, or even better, somebody wants to be, if somebody wants to be like you, I talk to Tom Woods. I hang out with Tom Woods. That's an impressive human being. Mm-hmm. That is somebody that everyone should aspire to be like. The way he talks, the way he stands, and the knowledge he has, and what he's done to grow wealth and be able to exist outside the system. I mean, that should be your first goal more than anything, especially if you plan on having a family. And I think that's one of the, and guilty right here. That's one of the biggest problems with people who don't have families, is they have their motivation is only to their own. And they can, when it's just you can get by, you can just get by and you'll be happy. And I just think that there should be more, the whole meme. I mean, I've seen this. I've seen this where they'll say, oh, libertarians, someone said this recently, libertarians are born on second base, and they were giving something and they got to third, and they made it to home plate, and they think they hit a home run or something like that. Basically saying that like everyone who's a libertarian is a privileged rich kid. I friggin' wish.
Yeah, no kidding.
I friggin' wish,
Yeah.
The people, I mean, and I made fun a little bit of the fundraising to get people to Reno. Mm-hmm. Just because I knew that was a necessity. If it was something where it was like right from the start, it was like, we don't want people spending money out of their own pocket to get to Reno. So we're just going to, all of our delegates, we're going to make sure they get there. We're going to do this huge fundraiser or whatever. So people don't have to take money out of it. But no, but this was actually for people who couldn't afford to get there. It's like, and if you can't afford to get there, I mean, that's one of the, I was going to go. I did not want to spend the amount of money that people were telling me that they were spending on like hotels and Airbnbs and flights. I was like, I'll go to Texas and go to Childeberg. That's what I was doing that weekend. I was like hanging out with my buddies on the Colorado. And I don't, I don't really call myself a libertarian anymore. There are libertarian values that I consider to be dear, but I realize people still consider me to be libertarian adjacent, and probably a lot of my audience is still holds libertarian values. But I'm working every day to try to be more impressive as a human being, reading more, working out more, trying to eat a lot better, maybe even wear a pressed shirt when I go on a podcast or something like that. Yeah, it just seems like something people should want to be like you. People should want to follow you. And that's not something that, I mean, you go back and go to Unn's report and go to Unn's website and read some of Murray Rothbard's old articles about going to Libertarian Party events. It hasn't changed. He's like, there's nobody impressive. There's just no impressive people here, and I mean, but I will say this, and Dave and I talked about this, that it is impressive that basically one of the only organizations that it seemed have been de-wokeified in the last 10 years looks like the Libertarian Party has gotten that way. And they still have a long way to go. And, but it's like I said, and let me say this again. It's only been 2 months. I'm not expecting to see anything after a couple months, after 3 months, after 4 months. But the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire should be allowed to tweet what they want. And if they get if they get written up over in hell, that country in hell, that's so good. I mean, I was so proud. I was so proud of you guys. I really was.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like I haven't lost faith in the whole thing or whatever. I still think Dave running for president, I understand the detractors, why they think people are going to put too much time and effort and are going to be disappointed. Like, I don't expect Dave to win. I don't even necessarily expect to get attention for it. We'll see what happens, but it's something I'm still very interested in, and I have the time and money to, be behind that. It's something I still want to see happen, but just, I think we should be taking note of, when things are headed in the wrong direction before we even get there. I mean, the people that this stuff upset and everything it threw into a tizzy, it's like, guys, if this is enough to throw us into a tizzy and hang the whole thing up, like we're not ready to take on, we're not ready to take this on from a presidential campaign standpoint. But yeah, we'll see what happens. Sure. Pete, it was great talking to you again.
Thanks. Ray.
Let's talk again soon. Where can people keep up with your work?
The Quiñones show. I'm still on YouTube. I don't have any strikes right now. I don't know how the hell that happened. Well, there are select episodes that don't go up on YouTube. I'm sure. I know when a certain group gets mentioned too many times in an episode, it's like, it's not going up on YouTube. But all the podcatchers, and then PeteSubstack.com.
Yeah, how many what number Twitter account are you on now, by the way?
6, I think.
6. Oh man.
Yeah. I tried to, when the whole Musk thing was happening, I remembered my login from my original Twitter account, my 2009 Twitter account, and I tried to appeal, and they were like, no. Like, still no.
Yeah, no, they're not gonna let me back on either. I think I've made 5 now. I just got my 5th account banned the other day, and I'm probably done for a while. I don't know. I can't even. And this last one, didn't have any links to my show, no pictures of me, no. I mean, people who know me could tell, like, oh yeah, that's Reed, but it still got nuked. So I can't put my head above water.
Well, I think one of the reasons why it's not hard for me is I always know that it's going to happen, so I always I always have a backup ready to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I have a backup out there that I've actually like went into some of the more controversial threads on you guys and LP National, and commented with my backup, and already got some blocks on that one too. So.
Very nice. All right, man. Well, yeah, let's talk soon. Keep up the good work.
I appreciate it, brother. Thank you.